following on from that incident I mentioned with a client of mine removing a demo or proof of concept Lync 2010 environment without realizing how many people were using it, I thought it'd be useful just to run through the processes of restoring a 2010 environment. It's not particularly difficult, doesn't take very long to do either. So let's have a look and see what's involved. So before we do that, let's have a look and see what we're actually restoring. So my lab here has a 2010 Enterprise Edition deployment. You can see I've got a couple of contacts added to my list. They're set up for Enterprise Voice as well. If we have a look at the topology builder, you'll see that I've got a single enterprise pool with a single Enterprise Edition server in there. There's my SQL stores, my file stores. I've also got archive and monitoring set up as well. So before we can destroy this and look at the restore, we need to actually back up the information that we need to restore. So there's a couple of ways to do this. The easiest way is to export the configuration for the topology. So let's do that first. We're going to fire up the link management shell. There we go, and we're going to use the export CS configuration command to export our configuration to a zip file. You're probably familiar with this from doing this for Access Edge servers. So I'm going to call it topology backup. There we go, and it's done. So we can exit out of that. So the next thing we need to back up are user contacts. So these are things like, well, the contact list, the persistent data for users. That's used, you can do that using a tool called db-imp-exp. So we need to fire up a DOS prompt for that. It's installed with your front-end servers. It's under program files, and then common files, and then Microsoft Lync server. There we go, and then under support, you'll see that has our import and export files in there. So there's a couple of commands that we can use to actually export and import. I've copied them into my notepad here just to make it easier, but if you look at the blog article, it gives you the format of the commands. Essentially what it is, we've specified the SQL server we're exporting from and the instance. The instance is there, and that's the XML file that we're exporting to. So what I'm going to do is just select that. Now I'm going to paste it into my DOS prompt. And there we go. If we now have a look, we should have our couple of backup files. So we've got our topology backup and we have our contact data. So I'm going to pop those to on a different server. So I'll pop that on my DC. On my DC I've got a folder called backups. I'll just paste the stuff in there. Okay, so how do we destroy this environment? Well, it's pretty easy. First thing I'm going to do is just force shut down the server. There we go, it's gone. Next, from the SQL server, which houses all my databases, which you can see here, I'm going to delete all those databases. Okay, so I've now run through, I've deleted those databases, so let's rebuild our server and we'll have a look at how we go through doing that whole restoration. So here we are with our freshly destroyed and recreated server. Just to show you, there's nothing on it. I've already put the Pre-Reqs on, like IIS and stuff like that, because you know this article isn't about how to build a Lync server, it's how to do the recovery. So if we have a quick look at the SQL server, for example, you'll see that currently there's no databases on there for Lync at all. I've completely cleared them. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is actually get the topology builder installed, get the management shell installed, and then we can start restoring the CMS and actually restoring some of the configuration information. So let's start by getting our topology builder and the management shell installed. I've already got the Lync 2010 DVD attached. There we go. So we'll just let it get through to the main installation screen. There we go. And what we're going to do is just install the topology builder there. That's finished. So we need to fire up the management shell, which is there, the Lync server management shell. And what we're going to do is we're going to recreate the central management store. Now, there is a command to do that. Here's one I've made earlier, which is the install CS database command. The details on the command format are in my blog, but essentially what you're specifying is the SQL server you're going to use and the instance name. So we paste it to the shell and let it finish. It doesn't take very long at all. So the next thing we need to do is set the control point for the CMS, which essentially is just a placeholder in the AD pointing to the relevant management store. The command for that is set CS configuration store location, again pointing to the specific SQL server and the instance name. I'm going to copy it and paste it into my management shell. Say yes to this. It's basically asking, well, warning you that you're about to change it. We're going to say yes and let it run. So that's done. Now, if you remember, we had a couple of backup files that we produced earlier, and I popped them on my DC. So what I'm going to do is just now recover them. There we go, under backups. I'm going to copy those and put them on my C drive. We've got topology backup, which is the one we use from export CS configuration, and then our contact data, which was from dbimpexp or dbimpexp. So the same process. So we're going to import -cs configuration, specify the file name, which was topology backup, and just let that run. It'll only take a moment. So what we need to do now is fire up the topology builder and have a look in there. In fact, there's one other step we need to do, by the way, which is enable CS topology. So let's fire up our topology builder. We'll have a look and see what the next steps are. So let's fire up topology builder. Oh, it's already on my list there. There we go. What we should be able to do is download the topology from an existing deployment. We should see all of our settings in here now. We've got our enterprise pools, we've got our SQL stores, etc. So the first thing we're going to do is right click on the top there and install databases, or install database. And what that should do is go through and see which databases are part of the topology that actually need pushing through to our SQL. And what I'm going to do is just change our file locations as well, because I've changed the default locations on my SQL server. So let that run, shouldn't take too long. And there we go, that piece is finished. So click finish there. The next thing we're going to do is actually just publish the topology. So topology, publish. And it's finished. So at this point now we can close down both the topology builder and our management shell. So what we should see now, if we quickly jump across to our SQL server, which is this one, we should see now that all the databases that are in our topology have been created. So you can even see things like the quality of experience, the archiving and all that sort of stuff. So we're now at the point that we're ready to install our Lync 2010 Enterprise Edition front end. So we'll fire up the DVD again. So what we need to do is just go through the install or update Lync server system process. This will go through and actually set up our Lync front end. Now this blog isn't about setting up a front end server, so I'm not going to run through the whole process again. I'd assume if you were doing this kind of restore operation, you'd know about this piece anyway. So let me get this piece set up, and then we'll come back to it in a few minutes. Right, so here we are with our completed Lync 2010 front-end server. Now before we can do anything with this, we need to make sure that the user replicator is finished importing the users from the Active Directory. You can either wait for a certain event in the event viewer, which is 30024, I think. We can ignore those errors from the mediation at the minute, but if you want to, you can actually force it as well. So what we can do is, if we fire up the Lync server management shell, the command you want is update-cs user database. So let's wait for that to run. You should see an event in the log once it's finished. Let's just wait, shouldn't take too long, hopefully. There we go, you can see the user replicator is finished. Let's have a look. So 0024, so I was nearly right. Okay, so we now know that the user replicator is finished. We can drop out of that. So what we should be able to do now is log in as one of our users. So for example, I've got our Lync 2010 client here. So I'm just going to sign in as our user. There we go. So you can see that we've now fully restored this from having no SQL backend and from having no front ends. But the one thing you will notice is my contacts are missing. And the reason for that is there's one piece of information that we haven't yet restored, and that's the persistent data for the user accounts. That was the one that we exported using db imp exp. So let's have a look and see how we re-import that information. So I'm just going to sign out of that user, fire up a DOS prompt. Okay, we need to get to that utility, which is program files, common files, Lync server, and then under support. So we should see it in there. So the format for the command to do an import rather than an export is slightly different. Again, I've already copied it into my path here. Sorry, into my notepad. So that's the format. We've got the command, we're specifying that we're importing, we're specifying the SQL server and the instance, and of course the XML file that we're reporting, and also the resource type. So I'm going to copy that and just paste it into my DOS prompt. Just need to let that run, shouldn't take too long. And it's finished. 258 resources, that's roughly about right. I've got about 258 users at a guess. So we should be able to close that down now. Now, when we log into our Lync client again, we should see that our contacts are back. Hopefully everything else will be restored. So if we look, we should have our telephony there. Yeah, all the information is there. So we've gone from a completely clean system with no SQL databases at all, no front end, to restoring the system very quickly. It's not a difficult job to do. Obviously, the more complex your environment, the longer the restoration can take. We also haven't looked at restoring things like response groups or archiving data or monitoring data, that sort of stuff. Things like the archiving data, you can restore just using traditional SQL tools for that component. There are a couple of scripts specific for response groups. Maybe we'll cover those in a different article. And the file shares, for example, well, you can use normal backup and restore topologies for that. So normal file backup type stuff. So I hope you can see it is easier than most people imagine. It does come down to having access to those backup files, of course, which are a copy of your topology and, of course, a copy of your contacts as well. So it's worthwhile making sure that you've got relevant copies of those.